Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Alpine Odyssey. We are working on the exterior of this walkthrough gift shop that we went ahead and gray boxed out at a way earlier date. It seems like these buildings are much more detail oriented and so they take a lot longer to make. Key in point what we're doing here. I am wanting to introduce a little bit more sculptural elements as we progress through this section of the park. And I want that because I want this transition of kind of ruins to pristine back to ruins again. And for me to get that, we have to start introducing colorful kind of sculptures here and there, and pretty much everywhere in this middle area right before the actual ziggurat that is going to be housing the log flume ride. And to do that, we're going to make some pristine kind of art-shaped sculptures that we're going to put into the walls. And we will make them pristine and eventually kind of cover them with overgrowth a little bit, just so they're not quite as vibrant. In fact, I chose very vibrant colors eventually to make these, just so that they can kind of stick out and read from a distance. That might be a little bit too bright, but you know, it's nothing that we can't dull down if you guys think it looks a little janky. So what we have here are some type of cat, maybe possible snake motif going up on these walls, and these are all art shapes, and these are going to be sticking out from the surface. And this over on the right hand side is something that might look a little bit more like hieroglyphs, because we can't really do much in terms of little details for these things, like making little spearmen throwing items or fancy headdresses due to space and sizes for a lot of these parts. However, I am perfectly fine with just doing some rough geometrical shapes, and then we'll color code them just to make it look a little bit more cool in general. We're going to be adding some bricks onto the surface just so that this area has some texture. We'll also be eventually removing out the rough stone and replacing it with rough brick, which will look a little bit more naturalistic into the background there. I was thinking about doing some, fancier patterns on the top here. Maybe using these wooden elements so we can get that swirl element going there. But, in essence, I think repetitive, basic geometrical shapes will go ahead and last a little bit longer and read from afar a little bit better. So we have our right side that we're going to be making, and then we're going to try and copy it to the best of our abilities to the left side. And so if we're going to copy it, might as well get it 100% done. That way we can just slide it over and be done with the overall placement. I'm also not worrying about color at this point. I'm more worried about getting the shape done. Color can always be changed. Shape you're kind of stuck with as soon as you lay it down. And, it's not something that I want to have to do multiple times to get the iteration as we try and choose colors. So, it's very common to do this even in drawing. Maybe draw something in black and white and then add color to it second. In fact, that's kind of how I was taught to do paintings anyways. It's this kind of do an underpainting drawing segment and then you add color over it. That way you are focusing more on the colors rather than getting the proportions right, and it kind of frees you up to work on those complicated things, because for me personally, color theory is much harder than simple shapes and proportion and drawing, and so it's a struggle for me to do. I've always kind of had bad color theory. In fact, I'm not 100% even sold on the color that we end up going with on here. I think a lot of it looks a little too janky, too much like a children's like thing. But you'll see that as we get to that point. That's kind of my biggest critique about this section once it's done. It just looks a little too much like a toy. So, that's something to consider. Maybe I'll do that in the live stream. We'll pick a new color for you guys. So if you guys want to come out in the live streams, we do a lot of this stuff live. In fact, what you'll see in the background occasionally is this giant gray box structure. We went ahead last weekend and worked on building a very large ziggurat, just roughed it in, and also trying to get the train track, pathing, and the log flume ride to interact with it, and I think it was pretty successful. I think the log flume ride is a little weak right now, but hopefully I can improve that as we progress. It's currently not even all green in its stats, and I would like to keep all my main items, you know, like the roller coaster in the background there, and this log flume ride, and you know, our next roller coaster, what have you, to be all green rated. That way they deserve kind of their popular landmark location, and you know, hopefully we can do that going forward. So it might need some more work. Here we're doing this kind of mouth motif going through there, and then we're giving this thing an elongated nose slash trunk. I don't quite know exactly what animal we're going for here, but I just thought it kind of looked cool. I do look at some decent reference images for these motifs, just because I need something that looks at least somewhat like a Mayan or Aztec theme. That way we can at least say this makes some sense in the future. And so, you know, they do a lot of these kind of very round objects going out, interacting with themselves, a lot of eyes, very cylindrical segments going up there. So you can see we have the thicker upper eyelid, a thinner line for the iris, and then a thinner line at the bottom for our lower eyelid. And you know, when you color those things, it can look pretty mean looking. And you can see you're starting to get this face-like structure to be forming out from this building, and this going through these sculptural art shapes is just a time-consuming effort on our part, and I think it's going to hopefully pay off in the long run, because it adds a whole bunch of detail to these buildings, and that's what I wanted. I wanted, as I said, this progression from ruins and kind of really dull colors to vibrant and then fading away again. And when we get to the Ziggurat, it's going to be covered with motif just like this, and hopefully it doesn't get either too messy or bogged down. You never really know when you're doing kind of repetitive shapes how things are going to interact with each other, and then when you add color on top of that, it just gets more and more complicated as you go and go and go. A lot of these vertical columns, the brick colors, those will be reshaded eventually towards the end. Wanted to mess around with maybe adding a flat roof. Didn't really like the wood, so we delete that. We'll end up kind of doing a little bit something more custom and matches what we've already done kind of before back there. This nose element, decided to go ahead and fill it in, make it a solid shape. That way it just looks a little bit more mean and weighty on the front there. And then we can simply move and copy the motif to the other side, because this is a kind of walk-through store, and that way, you know, the building is completely tied from one end to the other. There is a little bit of a back room segment that we don't quite get to this episode, just because of all the other things kind of taking so much more time than normal. You'll notice that it feels like this section of the park goes a lot more slowly than the previous European section. And what I'm discovering is that I'm very comfortable doing European, kind of this medieval or slightly fantasy theme set, because that's something that I am very passionate about, you know, in my day-to-day. And being passionate and well-versed in kind of basic architectural themes there really helps out with that. It's not helping so much with this, and that is creating a little bit of a struggle, but I think that's okay, because eventually we'll slowly learn, pick up on it, and get better over time. When it comes down to it, I think this might be one of my favorite Aztec buildings, just because of how detailed it ends up getting. So it's kind of raising the bar in terms of what we might be able to do on a facade, especially in the future. But it also is relatively weak in terms of maybe the imagery used. So that's kind of an interesting little side note for me, kind of talking about more myself and maybe what we might want to see in the future. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think, of course, and give me any feedback necessary. This is the type of stuff that I really enjoy, having a community like we do here on YouTube, where we can, you know, get feedback. I can hopefully teach you guys something by you guys watching me, and then through your comments, we all kind of learn and grow together. That is, you know, my favorite thing about YouTube, and hopefully you guys like that aspect as well. We're adding a ramp to the left side of this building. Now this ramp is the first kind of wheelchair access area for here. This area is going to need a lot. There's a lot of staircases going up and down. I will be adding them, like I promised, over time. But this one's kind of the main one from the lower section here up to the mid tier, because there's actually a ramp across the bridge. So up until this point, you can pretty much access every level on that wheelchair, and then going forward now you can access an additional level. We're gonna have to think about how to do that with the lower level on the plateau just by the riverside. We could possibly put an elevator inside the structure over there. Could be an option, who knows. You know, there's a lot of things we can do and even talk about during the live streams, and you guys can give me suggestions there. At this point, you can see this thing's starting to get really, really detailed and very, very busy. And that's what we were going for this kind of segment. We added a little bit of a fish motif on the right side there. That's really the only 2D kind of flat relief section that I put an image on. At least a readable image. So that's something I might want to consider as we go through and add more of these to other buildings. But it was pretty successful, I think. At this point, we're just adding up a little bit of a tiered roof here, because it's pretty common to see in these themes, these ancient kind of civilizations, where they do a very heavy foundation and then a flat roof over top of it, because it requires such a heavy foundation to have a solid roof like we're doing here. Otherwise, they might be able to get away with, you know, doing some timber frames and then just some straw roofing for smaller structures. But these Aztec Mayan civilizations did a lot of stonework, very much like how the Egyptians were. I mean, there was plenty of thatch and stucco, I'm sure, used. But as that gets eroded, you know, we're kind of left with just the ruins of the foundations. And that's just something to take note of as we go through. And plus, it just makes it look a little bit more grand of a society than maybe just doing thatch-covered huts would be in the first place. We're doing this very kind of heavy stone surrounding going across this roof line. That way we can kind of get a break in texture. I feel like texture is going to be a super important thing to think about as we go through this building. And then even when we start adding greenery over this to make it look overgrown and also to help mute the colors, it's going to be another thing that we have to think about, because that's even texture in itself, right? The leaves, the grass, any ferns or shrubs that you throw on this building changes the building's shape, it changes the silhouette, and you know, you just have to try and account for all of these as you progress through. We're using this wooden fence as a lot of this roofing, very solid looking. We'll be, of course, filling that in with a lot of kind of grass colors and shapes, just so from afar it looks a little bit more sealed, and it doesn't look like whenever it rains here in Alpine Odyssey, they'll get any sort of water damage on the merchandise that are inside there. We're making a blue trim in this section, because blue is a pretty nice, good royal color to have. We're making these brick cornerstones. These are going to be red, and then the tan sandstone underneath of it is going to be kind of a goldish color, orange gold, and I think that makes it look even better and makes the red pop out even more as well. And the lower area here will even be turned gold, I believe, if I can remember correctly. And then we get to start coloring a lot of these sculptures. Now, the problem being that we are using art shapes, the texture doesn't look quite right. It looks too smooth. I think that's a problem with a lot of these art shapes. I kind of wish we could choose what texture base these things would have. That way they could interact with the lighting system a little bit more dynamically. They can hopefully even then become a little bit more worked into the building itself. But overall, I think this turned out alright, even though it is a little bit on the shiny side. At this point, you can really see that pronounced nose, those teeth, the overall facial structure, and then the eyes kind of squinting through, overlooking this section. It looks pretty cool and menacing. We're starting to add even more colors to the lower areas, and then I think at this point I kind of went a little too saturated with my colors, and things started to look a little bit too cartoony, and you start losing a little bit of the vision that I originally had. So I might have to go back in here this weekend and touch this up. Who knows? If you guys like it in the comments, I might be able to leave it. That way we can just keep kind of pressing on here. These are like cat structures. You know, they have kind of long teeth in the front, maybe panthers, who knows. Just kind of really winging it at this point. That's just kind of how I do a lot of things in Planet Coaster. It's just kind of show up and start building and see what you can make. So it can be a little bit stressful when you're working like that. A lot of these red colors are going to get changed to this kind of teal, blue, green, and that will be pretty much it for the speed build section. Off camera, I'm gonna add a whole bunch of greenery to this, make it look a little bit more overgrown. That way you guys can see a little bit more of a finished look without making this episode run on too long. So here we go. All right, here we are taking a look at the exterior of the gift shop. You can see the gift shop is placed on the inside there already. We just need to hook a path up to it, and then hopefully during a future live stream, we'll go ahead and decorate the interior, make it actually usable and really nice looking, hopefully. What we have on the outside, we have a whole lot of kind of simple shapes and color and some sculptural reliefs going along the front here. I really like how kind of our head turned out and the way kind of these claw-like elements are kind of grasping onto the side. I think that looks pretty neat up there. I added a whole bunch of overgrowth into this building. That way it slowly, it kind of makes it look a little bit more green than it did right during the video. I think a lot of this teal looked a little bit more like this color, but since we introduced so much darker green elements to that, it's kind of giving the optical illusion of it, making it darker and darker. We covered up a lot of the base kind of geometry shapes over on the side. That way, you know, from a distance, you can kind of see their stuff down there, but they're not overly distracting. I mean, even from eye level and stuff, they're kind of above your eyesight there, so they're not hopefully overbearing onto anything else. The roof, very simple. We added a whole bunch of wooden fences. We added the little bit of overgrowth. The entrance from the back alleyway here has the same kind of face on one side, kind of glaring down at you. It does look pretty intimidating, but it also, provides a cool sight line through these arches to see the ride swinging in the background there. And so that's going to provide some movement for us. You can also, off in the distance here, the constant little splashing of our log flume ride, which I can probably go over in just a second if you guys missed the live stream that happened over the weekend. But as you can see, we are slowly moving from this really dull color palette, becoming brighter and brighter. And that will kind of continue as we get closer to the Ziggurat, to where a lot of the Ziggurat will have probably those elements, and then it'll fade away. We'll probably do some sort of ball court, tiki type belly dancer maybe area, who knows. And that would be pretty much where the area gets finished, pretty much right here around this bend. Then you get the little train stop that's going to be added near the antiquity area. And then you have all the way around here another train stop, and then you go back to the final one. So the train tracks are laid out. They're not final. They get edited as we continue. As you know, last episode we went ahead and put the train tracks across here, but with the introduction of this massive drop and splashdown section with this log flume ride, we had to kind of edit the train track and make it go around and into the tomb itself. Or Ziggurat in this case. I keep thinking tomb because it looks like a pyramid. It makes me think of Egypt a little bit. We are continually working on custom supports. I want this whole area to be custom supported with this train tracks. It's going to be a long process, but that's something I want to do. We're doing some of these broken pillars, some rockways and things kind of supporting a lot of this. There comes a splashdown now. Boom. Right there. Currently, this ride, again, is a little basic. It's not really done yet. It only has 2 drops, and I'm sure we can improve upon it hopefully in the future for you guys. But we got it to line up pretty well on the front and back there. We'll just have to do some custom kind of supports and waterways for this huge drop there, and I think that'll make it look a whole lot better. But from afar you can see now the Aztec area is really kind of coming into its own. The plaza and main road from the European section does a really nice fade into a plaza. And then up here, you can see it really continuing. So we have this huge direction shift from this kind of three-pointed axis to more of a single path through here. And then we have some open space here. There might be some open space up here with a queue. We get backstage area eventually. A lot of the backstaging on this, unlike the European section, because we're going to have a lot of this white boxing behind a lot of these buildings, it's going to be different because we have the terrain going up continually as we get farther back there. A lot of these backstages will be pretty short comparatively to the buildings. And I'm thinking that there'll be tunnels and underground structures to support a lot of these shops and facilities rather than how it's laid out in the European section. At least that's what I'm going to say, just to make it, a little bit more easier on me. There's no way that I'm going to sit there and make all the corridors actual functioning. Other than that, here is the little ramp going up there. It's a simple zigzag kind of effect. I don't quite know how I want to handle this retaining wall or the restaurant that's going up here and its outdoor seating plaza, because this will provide a great view over time. And yeah, that's pretty much where we're at currently. If you guys enjoyed today's episode, feel free to subscribe to my channel for more creative goodness such as this. Go ahead and hit that like button. Leave a comment down below on what you guys think, what we should be adding to the park, and what you guys want to see in the future. So until then, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.